All right, fellas. 3.3a. Let's go straight into it. So the impact of economic and military considerations for foreign policy. Economic considerations. Economic damage from World War I made Britain and France focus on recovery and protecting international trade rather than preparing for war. This weakened the League's response to Japan's invasion of Manchuria. They avoided strong action against Italy and Germany because they feared war and wanted allies. High costs and risks of military action led them to ignore Hitler's early moves. Now, military considerations, right? Britain and France focused on defensive military strategies such as the Maginot Line and protecting the British Empire, rather than preparing for war. Economic weakness from the Great Depression and limited military strength made large-scale military action unrealistic. To avoid war, they chose not to confront aggression in Central Europe and more countries. Now, 3.3b. Wait. Oh, yeah. I ripped out the page of this. Wait. No. Never mind. All right. The changing nature of relations with the USSR and the impact on foreign policy. Communism was the main threat during Great Depression, so Britain and France viewed Hitler's Germany as a barrier against Soviet expansion. The USSR distrusted Britain and France, and the rise of military dictatorship in Germany and Japan alarmed the USSR. They shared fear of German expansion, so this improved relations between the USSR and Western countries. Now, this is the rip page. Okay. Now, the France and USSR formed alliances while Britain aided formal agreements but allowed diplomatic talks. Japanese aggression led to USSR joining the League, and the USSR lacked support, criticized the League. Disagreement over Spanish Civil War and Abyssinia showed divisions, weakening cooperation in the League. Stalin wanted closer military ties with Britain and France, and the Anti-Comintern Pact alarmed the USSR as it threatened communism and posed a real security threat. The USSR allied with Germany. Now for 3.3c, we've got it right here. Let me holler at you guys. All right, look. The actions taken to appease Hitler. By 1938, Germany, under Hitler, had defied the Treaty of Versailles, remilitarized the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and built a stronger army. Britain and France's lack of decisive action over earlier crises signaled a weakness that Hitler exploited. Despite the threat, appeasement prevailed as military confrontation seemed risky and costly. Hitler intentionally drove a wedge between Britain and France using diplomacy and agreements, like the 1935 Anglo-German Naval Agreement. Now, France. They feared German power, but hesitated to act without British support, showing reliance on alliances. Now, Britain's economic interest in a strong Germany clashed with France's desire to keep Germany weak, increasing distrust between the two countries. Many British politicians sympathized with Germany, believing the Treaty of Versailles had been too harsh and Hitler was correcting past wrongs. Hitler portrayed himself as peaceful, though through actions like the 1934 Non-Aggression Pact with Poland and the return of the Tsar in 1935. This convinced Britain that his actions were justifiable, delaying opposition until Germany invaded Czechoslovakia in 1939. Now, the attitudes towards rearmament. The Stresa Front aimed to stop Hitler's rearmament and preserve the Paris Peace Settlement. Britain undermined the Stresa Front by signing the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, allowing Germany to expand its navy beyond Versailles limits. This act showed British appeasement, prioritizing better relations with Germany over enforcing treaty rules. Britain's Anglo-German Naval Agreement angered France, seen as a betrayal of European stability and French security. The agreement showed Britain prioritizing its own interests over commitments to allies. Mussolini viewed it as proof of British weakness, knowing France would avoid conflict without British backing. Now, the attitudes towards the Rhineland. Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, directly violating the Treaty of Versailles and the Locarno Treaties. He justified it as a defensive measure against the Franco-Soviet Treaty, presenting it as protecting Germany. This was a calculated gamble, exploiting the fact that France and other powers were unlikely to respond militarily. French inaction allowed Germany to occupy the Rhineland because France faced a financial crisis and overestimated the German threat. Military intervention was seen as too costly and politically risky ahead of elections. France criticized Germany publicly and appealed to the League of Nations and Britain, testing whether Britain would act, but Britain also avoided confrontation. Britain did not see remilitarization as a threat, viewing it as Germany occupying its own territory, and even considered negotiating with Hitler. Distrust of France led Britain to favor diplomacy and negotiation over enforcing treaty obligations. France appealed to the League of Nations. Germany's remilitarization of the Rhineland violated the Treaty of Versailles and threatened French security. Now, France appealed this to the League, but Britain's refusal to act militarily blocked on an effective response, right? So Hitler saw the weakness and distrust between Britain and France as an opportunity, later using it to carry out the Anschluss, Now, attitudes towards the Anschluss. Let's talk about that now, right? So, Czechoslovakia was threatened by Germany after the Anschluss, but Hitler knew it could not resist without support from Britain or France. So France was politically weak and unable to act, especially without British backing. The lack of opposition allowed Germany to annex Austria, showing clear British and French appeasement. Now, Chamberlain. He became prime minister and strongly supported appeasement, favoring negotiation with Hitler. Some politicians opposed appeasement, including Anthony Eden, who resigned in 1938 over Chamberlain's policies. Churchill warned that the Anschluss threatened European peace and urged decisive action against Germany. British public opinion opposed war, seeing the Anschluss as not threatening Britain and supported by most Austrians. The risk of a wider war with Italy and Japan made military action unattractive. Britain and France condemned Germany but took no action, allowing Hitler to act as he predicted. Now 3.3D, finally. Czechoslovakia and the Munich crisis. Chamberlain followed appeasement at the Munich conference to avoid war with Hitler. Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, claiming he was protecting German-speaking people. Allowing Germany to take land broke post-World War I agreements and threatened peace in Europe. Now, the Munich crisis. We're close. Negotiations failed as Hitler kept increasing his demands, making the war seem likely and forcing Britain and France to consider defending Czechoslovakia. The Sudetenland was vital to Czechoslovakia's defense and industry, so losing it would leave the country weak and exposed. At the Munich conference, Britain and France gave in to Hitler without fighting, excluding Czechoslovakia and the USSR from decisions. The Munich conference tried to avoid war by letting Germany take the Sudetenland, and Czechoslovakia was forced to accept the decision, was left defenseless. Wow. Britain and France gave in to Hitler, and the Chamberlain believed this would bring peace. Many people across Europe praised Chamberlain and Daladier for preventing war and celebrated them as peacemakers. Others, like Churchill, criticized the agreement, warning that Hitler would break his promises. Czechoslovakia was a strong democratic country with a good economy and alliances for protection, and the Munich Agreement forced it to give up important land without being consulted. Losing territory and support from France left the country weak and open to invasion. the USSR was... Sorry, fellas. We were so close to finishing. My storage had run out. I didn't delete the last video. Alright, so the USSR was angry and worried because Stalin was excluded from the Munich Conference despite on an alliance with Czechoslovakia. Stalin believed Britain and France had sided with Hitler and weakened a key barrier protecting the USSR. And as a result, Stalin changed policy and chose to negotiate with Hitler instead of trusting Britain and France. Appeasement seemed sensible at first, but ended up having serious negative effects. It weakened the League of Nations and allowed aggression by Japan, Italy, and Germany. By the late 1930s, appeasement helped powerful dictatorships grow and threaten world peace. Now that is all we've got for the 3.3. We're almost done with 3. Oh my god, one more video. Alright, fellas. Look. Okay? I'm sorry. Okay, enjoy, buddy.